You made it, Paula.
Yes, I did. I'm real pleased with that plan.
Yeah.
Good for me.
You're,
I know, fine. It's
you're
only
like
been
a
2
solid
years.
C plus now.
Yeah, yeah, well.
We need a Nikki sighting and Trina.
Hi, Mark. Hey, I'm going to join without video so I can take minutes.
Sure you are.
I am.
You probably got JoJo right next to you.
Jojo is watching my grandsons play in the backyard in the 6 inches of swimming pool that I am allowing.
All right.
My guard dog.
So I got Jeannie.
Yeah, Nikki will join on. We have all the
Robert.
board members.
Bob.
Yep.
Okay, so let's
Yep.
go ahead and get started. So
Yep.
call the meeting back to order out of closed session. And if Mr. Colvig, would you like to go ahead and do a flag salute?
Certainly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Did it work?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I shut everybody's mics off. That way it worked better instead
It
of
did work great.
Okay.
Okay, report out of closed session, Mark.
Yep. We talked about our MOUs we're doing with both groups, what we did with the teachers that is signed and done. And we talked about CSEA that we have coming up on Monday. And I'm very confident with CSEA we'll have our agreement all said and done by Monday at the end of the day. So we're in good shape. Distance learning is now in place, and hopefully the teachers are getting revved up for what they're going to do in distance learning, and the admins are trying to figure out how they're going to connect with everybody. So we're up and running for right now. And then once distance learning gets up, the next giant hurdle is how to get back on site. And so my message to the admins was, let's not worry about that until after August 31st. Once we get up and running, then we'll have lots of conversation about the next phase.
Very good. Tessa, WTA comments?
Hello, good evening, everybody. Let's see, I don't have to be a puppy. How's everybody doing? Yeah, so I feel like my summer finally started on Friday after we signed the MOU, and just so grateful to have worked something out, come to an agreement. So I've been on campus, on different campuses, talking to the site reps and talking to members, and there's apprehension, there's concern, there's questions, but one thing I can say about Willits teachers is they kick butt, and they're really figuring out some great ideas, and seeing all kinds of really cool Bitmoji pages and slideshows and links and hyperlinks, and then, you know, how we're going to teach all of this from distance. We don't know. We're not going to be perfect. Please have grace. We're going to have grace. We're going to take it one day at a time and do the best darn job we can. we have new hires. Traditionally, we do a new hire luncheon. That would be August 17th, but because of the pandemic conditions and the fact that all of our new hires are going to be starting on the 17th at different locations, we're going to put together some goodie bags for them with a gift certificate to Lou's Caboose for lunch, and socially distance and mask deliver those and meet our new members and welcome them to the team. I believe there's 15 of them. Can't think of anything else. Didn't really have a long agenda. So I think that's where I'll end. Thank you.
So
Thank you, Tessa.
I have a question. I'm concerned as how teachers are going to establish a relationship with their kids, a personal relationship with their kids and the kids' families, not just what kind of technology stuff they're going to be able to show to teach, but what are they going to do to establish a relationship? So I'm concerned.
So I'm hearing a lot of different plans from different teachers. I worked with the 3rd grade yesterday, and we've got a plan for meeting each family the first week and putting up on our projector screen and setting up computers on a back table for the parents and the child to sit and walk them through step by step. And then we're still there in person to interact. There's probably nothing more important to your average teacher than to have that connection with the student. I don't think any of us teach because it's a factory job and we're just gonna, plug out another kid product. That's not it. It's about the relationships. So I don't know what all the different grade levels are doing, but I do know that everybody is working really hard to come up with ideas. And so if the community has ideas of how they would feel comfortable meeting with teachers, and if the board members do, please talk to us, because we're open to however we can develop those relationships. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. I also want to say that one thing I heard from parents is that they had struggled last year with the technology, the different programs that were used, the apps, that kind of thing, and some of the terminology, like with unlocking the code, I mean, that kind of stuff. What I heard parents say is that they would really like some sort of in-service from the school district or some from teachers as to what apps they're going to use and how they work, so that they can help their students, their kids, while their student is learning on remote learning. Parents would really like some background before the school year starts.
I know that my teachers
Yeah,
out
that
there
sounds like a
would.
really good idea.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
I'm sorry, Mark, Mr.
No, go
Rosenberg.
Go ahead, Tessa. Okay.
Okay. So that would be a great professional development day for sure. Like for us to all get together and collaborate on plans like that. I think we all understand that a lot of parents are going to need training, especially like our 3rd graders, because they've had very minimal work with a keyboard. And then you have your high school where, they've been doing that for all their life, really. So that's what I mean about having grace, is that, we started working on a pacing guide and just thought, wow, we can do this. We can be optimistic. We can set the bar up here, but be realistic. And if it takes 2 weeks for them to sign on to an email and remember a password and type their name, and I'm talking 3rd grade, of course, but on, going up like that, we're just going to have to be very patient. We're going to try our best, and you're going to have to trust that we always do more. You were a teacher, we always do more than anybody ever asks of us.
One of the things
The other thing I wanted to say was, I'm sorry, Mark, One
ahead.
more thing.
Yep.
Really important. Contact Governor Newsom. Write him a letter. Send him an email. Make a phone call. Of course, you're not going to talk to him personally, but the more people that they hear from at the state level, the more help we're going to get getting internet and Wi-Fi access in our rural areas. We need education for all our children. Mr. Westerberg is amazing. He set up these buses. He's setting up hotspots. That's awesome. But there's not going to be enough of them everywhere all the time, especially for like families that have multiple school-age children that all need to be doing class at the same time. Every day, because we're committed to a schedule. So please contact Governor Newsom, everybody. Go ahead, Mr. Westerberg. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. One of the things that Julie out at Sherwood is going to do, she's going to have a parents' night, like the first night or second night, and have all of them, if they can't go online and Zoom, they're going to come probably in person, and we're going to spread out. But we've got to get the parents in tune about what we're doing in the classroom and how we're going to work together. So
Yes.
I think you're going to find that that's going to be fairly common. That, yeah, especially in the younger grades, it's hard to build that class chemistry on the screen. And yeah, that's just unfortunately how it is.
Okay,
Do the
moving
best
forward.
we can, all of us.
Thank you, Tessa.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Moving forward, let's see, we got Dan Green, CSEA.
I'm here. I just put my phone on airplane mode. Once again, it's good to see everybody. The classified staff has been quite busy lately. We've been putting in new pumps for water at the high school. We've been putting in lots of plexiglass all over the sites for secretaries, some glass for other partitions. One thing everybody needs to realize is that we're not the only people doing this. So trying to get supplies, period, for a lot of these things, it's not working out very good because the supply chain is, it's overwhelmed with requests for stuff. The classified staff has actually been working through this whole thing. We've had grounds, we've had custodians, we've had maintenance staff, we've had other certificated or certified classified staff working. And the big thing that everybody did was we all found a way to make it work. We figured out how we can get these things done, how we can keep distance, how we can respect other space, how we can do all of these things. And I understand that every job in the district has a unique set of circumstances to it. So one person's path to having distance and making it work may not be another person's path. Some paths have to use a little more thinking than other paths, but that still means we can make it work. I'd like to thank several people in the district right now by name. I may mess up some of their names because people's names are sometimes a little difficult, but there is no bias in this about class or representation. It's all of the people that are participating, and it has to do with special ed. Special ed found a way to make things happen. However they did it, and it's working. The capacity and the number of kids may not be the capacity and the number of kids that some teachers may face in their class, but they worked at it and they found ways to make it happen. And I'd like to thank, from the classified staff, I'd like to thank Maggie Bertolino and Jocelyn Miller, Laura Cole, Carolyn Keyser, and we also have some employees that are attached to MCOE, Stephanie Fisher and Amy Christensen. It shows different entities working together and people helping out. I'd like to thank the certificated class. We got Yuko Kohut, Amanda Franco, Conan McKay, Tim Majuris, and Nicole Luer. Those two are from MCOE too. So again, everybody's working at things to try to make it work out. And then I'd like to thank Kelly and Rose. They figured it out. They're trying to make things work. We worked with them to try to get some sort of personal protection barrier stuff going. It's an example of that we can do stuff. And they're really striving to make it happen. And it was good to see some of those kids at school. And after that, we get into I don't want to take all of Mark's talking points, but we've really been working on a lot of other aspects in the district to try to make it possible for, all this remote learning. It's tough to do. And I today turned Mark on to some local people that are internet providers so we could try to work things out. There's things in the works, and a lot of this can be done, and we just need to keep moving forward to make it work and try to get kids back in the classroom because that's what they need to be. And thanks again to everybody all summer that worked and are continuing to work, and they're continuing to respect each other's space, and they're continuing to make this work and get the facilities ready to accept repopulation. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Let's move on to board comments. We'll start with Paula.
Hello. I'd only have a couple of things. I was really happy about the MOU being signed and taken care of. And there was some people were so confused about, did they have 4 days or 6? And I'm really, as far as in-service professional development days, I'm super happy it's 6. That's an awful lot of an extension, and that's a good thing. And I think that was a real good thing. Also, I think coming back to school is a wonderful idea. I do hope that everybody understands that all these comments on how important it is to have people get back into the classroom are not meant as any kind of pressure comments, because we will get to go back, students and teachers and families and volunteers and everything else, pretty much after COVID-19 dictates that it's okay for us to go back. We really need to be careful. Some people comment that it was such a feeling of pressure that they all had to come back, that it was so important. It is, but it is not. So it's a standard comment, and I don't think it's that big of a deal for anyone to feel pressured over. And then lastly, I kind of wanted to make sure of one other thing. There have been a lot of comments about some people took advantage of the situation last year in their going to work or not showing up or doing whatever they were supposed to do. As you all know, I truly believe that's an administrator's responsibility. If you find that someone's not doing their job, it's your job as an administrator to deal with that. The other thing I really do believe, however, is that teachers, like Tessa says, have always done all and more that has been expected of them. And it needs to be remembered that flexible hours are pretty much a standard to a teacher that people in the community or others not so conditioned to education might not understand. When you can't get a hold of a parent until 7 o'clock at night, it seems perfectly normal to me that you might find something else to do for a couple hours in the morning, so that those couple hours in the evening you can feel paid for, even though you never are completely, and that's a given. But flexibility is really important. I really do think that if people are going shopping in the middle of the afternoon instead of dealing with their class, it's because they dealt with their class early in the morning, or they're going to go back to their class later in the afternoon. And I do hope that those who can go back and forth from their classroom, either for supplies or technology or whatever is needed, would also feel that, yeah, that is an option. And we talked a little bit about the possibility a few months back of any kind of daycare in Willits for teachers, that's a great idea, but it is really, really wishful thinking. And so when all other things settle down, then maybe that's something that can come into being. But right now, it probably isn't going to be the plan. So a partnership sounds like a great idea. Anyway, those were the biggest deals. And I just wanted you to know I'm glad everybody's okay and coming back to work with this feeling of we can all share and get the job done.
Thank you, Paula.
You're welcome.
Jeannie?
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say I really, my heart, it made my heart feel good what Dan said about special ed. Special ed finds a way. That's what we do. And so we've always done is we find a way to help a kid succeed. And it takes a tremendous effort and creativity and long hours beyond our paid time to get kids to succeed, and special ed does find a way. It's ingrained in their DNA, I think. So I just wanted to say that. And I also, you know, when I picture little kids in kindergarten, I picture them sitting on the rug, sharing a book together, and the magic that has in it, the magic of two kids sitting together, sharing a book together and looking at pictures and talking and carrying on. That doesn't happen over Zoom. And I have my granddaughter who's just turned 6 today. She's going to the 1st grade and she doesn't know how to read. And, you know, I realize we're doing the best we can and that's what we have is remote learning, but there's a tremendous amount that's missing. And you know, I feel that this generation is going to have a hard time catching up. They're missing out on something essential, how to share, how to give and take, how to make friends, particularly the younger kids, that these are skills they are learning in school, in classrooms. It's not, you can't do that over Zoom. So anyway, I know we're doing the best we can, and that you know, I feel that teachers are essential learners. I believe that the Ed Code refers to them as essential learners, and I mean essential workers, and that that requires that we sometimes put ourselves beyond what we're comfortable with in order to meet our calling, which is to care for and teach kids. So anyway, when I voted for the remote learning at the last board meeting, I said I did it reluctantly because I do not think it's in the best interest of kids, but it's what we have. So thanks. And thank you to the special ed people. They're great.
Thank you, Jeannie. Mr. Colvig.
I'd just like to say that I think we should all be looking forward for success and doing our best to provide a caring environment for our students. And that's going to take a lot of compassion and a lot of cooperation. And I think we need to keep that in mind. That we want success and rules, but let's keep that caring environment, compassion and cooperation in the forefront. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Chavez.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to apologize for not being here at the last session. I was spending some time holding my wife's hand at ER, but she is fine. I'd like to extend my appreciation to all the staff and all the hard work that has gone around this pandemic. I appreciate the work that's been done. I have to agree with Jeannie in that it is unfortunate that the children are not in class, and we know that there is a great loss there, but we do what we have to do. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Tessa and Dan. Tessa for welcoming those new teachers It is so important, and they're the new breath and lifeblood of our organization. And Dan, thank you for recognizing those staff members. I appreciate both your work in representing our staff and doing what's best for the district. But things will get better. It'll just take. Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo the sentiments of all four of you in my comments. In addition to that, I'd like to also say that I received a number of emails from teachers specifically dealing with the question of whether we're going to come back to the classroom or not. But in some of those emails was also examples of some of the things that they're putting in play, developing virtual classrooms and very creative, very colorful products that hopefully will grab the attention of our students as we move further into this distance learning. So I want to say that I'm excited to see what the teachers are developing to help them bridge that gap. And I want to say thank you to all of them that are devoting all that extra energy and time. I understand you're not paid for it, and I'm sorry for that. Because as I said, there are many times you're grossly underpaid as an industry, but certainly when you put all this extra effort into something like this. Dan Green is absolutely correct. Many of you are going well above and beyond to make this work, and quite frankly, it's what we all expect, and it's what we have to do, and we appreciate you. That's all I've got, Mr. Superintendent.
Okay, couple things. One is there is one bonus in the pandemic, and Dan touched on it. Our buildings are as clean as they've ever been. We're fixing more stuff than we've ever been able to fix. The teachers probably in 5 months have grown 5 years in technology skills. And so there are some bonuses. It's not the way we all want to teach academically, but we're going to do what we have to do. And I'm really pleased that, now I'm focusing predominantly on internet access for kids. I put out a thing about the buses. We have 7 vehicles that are going to be Wi-Fi enabled. We're going to move around the district. I got Willits Charter to open up their buildings for public Wi-Fi. I met with, I was in on the Chamber of Commerce meeting and Rotary, talking to them about putting Wi-Fi out for the public so people can use it. I've met with Willits Online. I'm meeting with another group tomorrow. I put out last night on our websites and Facebook how parents can turn their phones into hotspots for their home. So I'm getting really focused on trying to get connectivity out there, and it's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt about it. But we're not going to get it everywhere, but we're going to get it as many places as we can so kids can get on and do what they need to do. One of the things that happens late in the year here, we had a retirement. Robert Parmenter retired from the district. So Robert Parmenter retired. Normally we have a plaque and all that stuff. So we'll do that. I think, Trina, the next time we can meet for real in person, we should make sure that we have the plaque and all that stuff for Robert. We had some retirements where we weren't able to do that this year because of not being able to meet together. So
I will take care of that, Mark.
yeah, we still have a ton of maintenance stuff to do. We're putting in watering systems, so we stop using city water. These are numbers that you sometimes go, you got to be kidding me, but we spend over $50,000 a year with the city watering the high school fields to keep them good for athletics and all that stuff. So that number's about to go to zero as soon as we start to use our well. So those are long-term investments that will help us. We're continuing to work through, find out whatever grants we can get to get what the things we need. So it's been a good summer from the standpoint of we're starting late enough. We're going to see what goes on in some other districts before we get going. And hopefully we'll learn from some of their mistakes and be able to move on. One thank you I need to do is for my office staff, which kind of includes Kelly and Rose and the tech people, because we're all over in the same place. We have all worked really unusual schedules over the summer. You'll rarely find that there's somebody not in the office, but we've worked from home, come in at different times. Everything is up and running and functioning well. And I'm known as the idea person, and they're the detail people, and they've been taking care of business. And so everything's on task. The payroll's running, the bills are getting paid, all of that stuff is happening. So, you know, district-wide, you know, we're functioning pretty normally, even though we're doing it at awkward times and with masks on and talking to each other across the hallway instead of in person. But we're getting there. So I feel good about where we're at to start the year. So, okay.
Okay, ready to move on? We're at item number 12A, public comment on the consent agenda items. If anybody has a public comment on the consent agenda item, please speak up. Hearing no public comments, I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
So Mr. Kovic and Paula. And is there any discussion on the consent agenda? That's items 1 through 4. Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, carries. Item C, approval of a PG&E easement deed. Do you want to give us some background on that, Mark?
Sure. At Sanhedrin, the gentleman who owns the taco house, by the way, a very nice guy, is building his family's home, and I believe a mother-in-law's suite is one building behind there. And they are adjacent to Sanhedrin's property. And the only way for them to get the gas and power they need is to go underneath the driveway at Sanhedrin. And I'm working with John Sherman. He is their lead contractor. John from the city, who retired from the city of Willits. And the board needs to officially approve that deed according to PG&E. My signature and okay was apparently not good enough. We tried to do some paperwork. I even got it notarized and gave it to him, but it needs board approval apparently for them to give that easement. They're going under the front. It's not even the parking lot at the school. It's in front of the gate of the school. They're going to bore underneath and put power and gas there.
So they're not going to disturb the asphalt?
They're trying not to. They're hoping they can bore right underneath it and take care of it.
Okay,
If not, they've told me they'll replace the asphalt.
got it. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve PG&E easement.
I
Is there a
second.
Moved and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion. Mark, is there a downside of any kind to this?
Not really. It's a normal building thing, but PG&E is very, very delicate about doing anything on anybody else's property without written permission, because they don't want to be held accountable for or liable for anything. And so,
I believe it's, according to the information there, it was about 90 feet.
yeah, it's 90 feet from, if you're looking at the gate to Sanhedrin, the transformer is right to the left of the gate up there, and they're going to come down and bore underneath over to the new site. And it's probably 90 feet to the box they're going to.
Hearing no further discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Carries. Item D, David, approval to surplus real estate. go ahead, Mark, and give us some more details on that. We talked briefly about that earlier. Is that something you want to deal with tonight, or is that something you want to worry about after the 7-Eleven committee?
Well, in hindsight, I think I really want to worry about it after I do the 7-Eleven committee, because the official process is to have a recommendation that the board approves from a 7-Eleven committee. But what I want to do is talk about it and make sure that everybody understands what we're looking at. There's an 8.5 acre parcel on the north side of the Blosser campus. That's property that we've had sectioned off, and we are asking the city to move it from industrial zoning to R2, which means either single or multi-family housing. The reason for us to do that is that there's a couple things. One is obviously the sale of property. Hopefully it would be enough to put a roof on Blosser and a parking lot fix at the high school. But more importantly, it also brings housing to the community. I hear that I've been working with the city and other groups who have been saying we don't have enough housing in Willits. And if we can bring some housing to Willits, it's going to help us with kids and numbers. And we have an ideal building location right between two schools and a rock's throw from Safeway. And so it's a 96, I believe, single units if they do singles. If they do multi, they could be up to 142 units. We're obviously not going to do anything. We're not developing the property. We're getting it in a position so a developer could purchase and do something with it. We're going to maintain the road on the north end of the property and use that as an entry for buses to Blosser. So they'll run along the railroad tracks and come in up at the top circle there by Kids Club. And that way we can take the buses out from the front of Blosser in the morning, which should help traffic. But this is one of those things, it's one of the few pieces of property we have. I mean, let's be honest, we can't take care of the sites we have now. We're not going to build a new school on that site. We don't have the funding, and we've got to take care of what we have. The other site is a site that is at Brookside. I was totally unaware that we owned this, but if you go to the back of Brookside's fence, you go down to a creek that's deep and goes across the creek all the way over to Mill Creek Street. And we own the adjacent property of 13 sites over there. And so we had to spend $25,000 mitigating the trees and branches falling to create a fire separation there. And it's not a pending issue because 20 years from now, it'll be a problem again. But I have talked to Mendocino Conservation Group and asked them if they're interested in the property. If you know the site I'm talking about, it drops way down into a valley. You go across the creek and then all the way across the creek to the fence line of the people who live on Mill Creek. So we're looking at this as something that is totally unusable for us. So I'm going to talk to the landowners. They may want to be waterfront owners, but they'd all have to agree to that. Or we can give it to the Mendocino Land Trust. But it's not a pressing issue. It's just one that we should take care of the problem now instead of kicking the can down the road.
Okay. Any discussion from the board?
Is this something we have to vote on tonight, or we just take that information and move on?
I think at this point, I'm going to wait. It's called a 7-Eleven committee, and there's specific rules in Ed Code of who I have to have on this committee to give us the thumbs up to say they make a recommendation that we surplus the property. Then after we do that, the board takes action to surplus it. Then we can go through, there's rights of refusal that go to other public entities. then we'll get it appraised, and then we would be able to sell it off. So this is a very cumbersome process. I've been at it for 15 months now.
Okay. Any other board discussion? So we'll move on to item E, approval of the revised budget 2020-2021. I guess we're in Nikki's ballot.
I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. So Mark, we may need to do what we've done in the past where you need permission.
Okay. I'll remember quickly how to do that.
Nikki, are you going to share those 3 pages that you sent us?
Yes, that is what we will be looking at. I think we will focus primarily on 2 of them because there is some redundancy and it's sort of just a different view. So I think we'll primarily be looking at the multi-year projection to start with. And then after that, we'll move on to the cash flow.
I'm trying to find I'm on my Mac. I'm trying to find the button that says share host. Okay. Oh. Okay, I think you can do it now, Nikki.
Let's see. I always forget the way this works. Oh. Okay.
There you go.
Are we there?
You
Yep.
are
Down. Okay. So I think it would be useful to discuss the progress of what we've seen in regards to the projections for the 2021 school. At the point of second interim, at which, you know, this would have been part of the multi-year projection at that time, we were anticipating a deficit spending of about $500,000. We then moved into budget adoption for 2021. We based our revenue projections on what the governor was projecting or proposing at that time, which included significant reductions to LCFF. As we know, then the final state budget, which was approved, did look quite a bit different than what the governor had been proposing. And rather than putting forward the reductions up front and then having the intention of backfilling that if federal funding came through, the Senate put forth a proposal that was ultimately passed, which included keeping LCFF funding relatively flat, so no COLA increase, but no massive reductions. However, that came along with some very significant cash deferrals. So that's one of the largest changes that we saw going from that budget adoption to now. So at the time of the budget adoption, the impact of those reductions and which we then tried to make other accommodations and find reductions where we could to accommodate that loss of revenue, put us in a position of projecting at budget adoption a deficit of over $800,000. Now that we are incorporating at this revision the final state approval of the budget, we are incorporating that LCFF revenue, which is relatively flat from last year, rather than the reduction. So that puts us in a position now for current year that we are in a better position in terms of fund balance and I want to be very clear that there's a large distinction between fund balance and cash flow. But in terms of projected ending fund balance, we're looking at a positive change in fund balance by about 200,000. When we look at the multi-year projection, there are several things that come into play. Obviously, step in column and STRS and PERS increases are always incorporated, so that, you know, always pushes expenditures out. In addition, we have a few restricted programs with some miscellaneous staffing, which the funding will be coming to an end in that second year of our multi-year, in which case we will have to pick up those expenses on the unrestricted side of the budget. In addition, we have some ROP funding that has been supporting a CTE position at the high school for the last many years that is coming to an end, in which case we will have to pick up that FTE. It currently is on the payroll of MCOE, and if we want to maintain that position, it will become our expenditure. So that also adds. So flat funding is what is sort of across the board projected right now in terms of LCFF. We're talking no COLA being anticipated across the 3 years, and then including obviously these additional expenses each year. What we see in the second year is a deficit of 689,000, and in the third year, deficit of 1.5 million. Now, the positive aspect, I will say, as to how this compares to our adopted version, is that at adoption, we were not meeting the 6% reserve for economic uncertainty in the second year. And in the third year, not only were we not meeting any reserve, we were showing that there was potential for not being able to meet obligations. Right now, what we are seeing with that, the current LCFF projections, is that we would meet the 6% in each of the 3 years. Now, it cuts quite close, of course, in the third year. We don't have much unassigned after that reserve, but clearly it is a better position to be in when you're able to meet your reserve for economic uncertainty. And despite the fact, you know, we are clearly in difficult economic times, having to ever use the reserve for economic uncertainty is something I would try to avoid at all costs, because you must meet that threshold in every given year. And if you dip below that, that puts you in the position in your future year of having to grow it back and then exceed it. You know, it really can snowball quickly on a district. So I think that is a bare minimum to consider being able to meet your reserves. Mark, is there anything else from the multi-year you feel like we need to highlight before we move into the cash flow discussion?
I have a question, Nikki.
Yeah.
Sure.
So with respect to the economic uncertainty reserve, that the state requirement is 3%, am I correct?
That is correct. And this district, since I've been here, we have used 6%. The reason 6% is that there was some legislation that was put into place several years ago that if certain economic conditions or conditions at the state budget level were to take place, that it would limit districts the amount that you could hold in a reserve. And that amount that they set was double the state minimum. So for us, the state minimum is 3%. That means that double is 6%. And those circumstances have never taken place to trigger that reserve cap. And quite frankly, I think it would be negligent of districts to try to keep such low reserves as their goal. When you think about the amount that monthly spending is, really 17% is what most of the fiscal organizations recommend, because that is a 2-month window of expenditure. So yes, 3% is the state minimum required, and 6% is what we have used in our projections. And so when we were at budget adoption, that second year that I said we weren't meeting the 6%, at that we were between the 3 and the 6. We were meeting the state required 3, but we were falling short of the 6 for the second year, and then not meeting either for the third. So in this scenario, we're meeting the 6 for all 3 years.
Just a couple basic numbers to keep in mind. Payroll is over $1 million when we put it out. 1% is 200,000 for us.
Right. Okay. Now, with regard to whether we file as qualified or unqualified, that would mean we'd fall below the 3%, correct?
So there are 3 certifications, and it's interesting because in the past we were required to file with a particular certification at budget adoption, and I did notice when we filed our paperwork this last June, that's no longer part of the official filing, but it is still definitions that we use to describe our budgets. And so the 3 are positive, qualified, and negative. And so qualified, 3 years of no problems meeting your obligations is positive. Qualified typically is something that districts, it's sort of in the middle. You're looking out at those 3 years and you see the potential for not being able to meet your obligation in one of your out years. And negative is generally, you are certainly not going to meet obligations for either the current or following years. So I would consider that where we were at budget adoption was qualified. We were looking at a position where there was potential to not meet obligations in the future.
So is the inability to maintain 3% considered one of those obligations, even though you may be able to pay for everything in terms of all other obligations?
That I don't know, to be honest with you, Alex. I've not been in the position, fortunately, to have to make that judgment call. And so I've not had to look up that fine print of the definition.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
Interesting. Okay, very good. Thank you. I believe this is an action item to approve the revised budget. We have a motion to approve.
Alex, we need to talk about page 3. I want Nikki to show that. There's some really important stuff on there. We need to make sure everybody really understands.
Not a problem. Go ahead.
Okay, so we need to do a new share. Okay, are you guys seeing the cash flow now?
No.
Now we do.
Oh.
Yeah, we have it, Nikki.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is Nikki's going to explain this to you, and I'm going to make sure we hit a couple points that are really important to know. So go ahead, Nikki, explain to them what you're showing them.
So I mentioned earlier, and this is something we've talked about, many times over the years, there's a very big distinction between our fund balance and our cash flows. When the state passes their legislation regarding how much we will be funded, they make a commitment to the amount they will fund us for that year, but that may not always represent when we receive that funding. And one of the things that we saw during the last recession was that the state used the deferral of cash payments to districts as a way to balance their own budget. So in other words, it becomes a distinction of they are allowing us to claim that as revenue for the current year. Meanwhile, they they book it into the following year, and we don't receive the money until the following year. And it helps them push their expenditures out into the future, and it helps them balance their current year budget. And so we did see this, a decade ago, and at that time, it started out somewhat slowly and then accelerated, and it lasted for several years, and they kind of pushed it farther and bigger numbers. What we're seeing this year, as I mentioned before, they did choose to pass a flat funding amount for us as opposed to a large cut. But in order to balance their budget, they are going to defer quite a significant amount of cash to districts. And for us, that means that beginning in February all the way through June, they have about $2.9 million of our LCFF funding that we will not receive in 2021. We will receive the actual dollars in the following fiscal year. It's not even all up front in July. It starts in July, and they don't complete the payback for that until, I believe it's September or October.
So one of the things I want to make sure that folks understand is if you look at accruals and you look at that 2.9 million in the far right corner, what Nikki's basically telling us is that although the state owes us that money, we're not going to get it this year. And where that money is owed to us, and we'll get it probably October-ish. But look what happens to May's fund balance in basically our cash, not our fund balance, but our
cash balance, yeah.
We're down to 200,000. Remember that payroll is $1 million, and we still have a payroll to go and an August payroll to go before we get that money. So cash flow is going to be a huge issue for us in the second half of the year.
And going into the following year as well.
Yeah,
so this puts us in a position where we may have to look at dry period funding.
Can you say that again?
It puts us into a position where we may have to actually consider dry period funding through the county.
I'm hoping not. I mean, we're monitoring this on a very regular basis and trying to keep up to speed. The other huge factor here is that, we are trying to still get some information from the state regarding the schedule for some of the one-time funds and how that will play out. There is some of it that we anticipate in the fall, and so that's incorporated here in the fall. There's some of it that we've heard it could be June before we see that. I don't know if that's true. So we have some of it represented here in June. Now, if we see the actual dollars for that sooner, that would improve, for instance, the May projected balance, because we have a chunk of that showing up in June in this projection. My bigger concern, to be honest, like right now looking at this, it does seem we can make it through this 12-month period. As Mark mentioned, this impact goes into the following year, and that's where I become particularly concerned for a couple of reasons. One is that when we look, for instance, at the beginning of this year, and we look at July, August, September, October, and by November, you can see from the beginning cash balance to the November ending cash balance, it drops significantly and fairly rapidly. And that's based on just the general flow of the revenues and how they come to us. And when you have a robust starting balance, there's room for that. But when we look at June having a projected ending balance of 828,000, that's a significant difference of the starting cash balance for the year. That leaves really no room for that kind of declining balance. And so I become concerned at looking at July, August, September, and that is something that I'm still in the works with our county office in developing the tools that we will need to do longer cash flow projection analysis. So right now, this has been our standard tool. We typically look at a 12-month period, within a fiscal year. And so we're having to develop the tools to look perhaps maybe at an 18-month or a 24-month in order to be prepared for some of those things. The other thing that concerns me when we start getting into that second year is that when we looked at the multi-year projection, we clearly see, the fund balance going down as expenses increase and revenue remains static. And much of the sort of buffer that we have in the world of cash flow is because of maintaining an appropriate reserve, fund balance. The lower our fund balance goes, the less buffer that we have for this cash flow. And when that's compounded by $2.9 million of cash deferrals, that really puts us in a very tight position. And there is a possibility we'll reach that point where we have to consider borrowing options. I, to be frank, don't anticipate the state suddenly resolving their budgetary concerns and having these deferrals cleared up in the following year and then we're good again. I anticipate deferrals to be part of our budgeting process now for a couple of years.
So let me add in a couple things, Nikki. If you look at this cash flow sheet, it gives you the roller coaster ride for next year. So we got a little less money. LCAP money wasn't as big as it was a year ago. Our funding's flat. They did give us some one-time funding to keep us whole, and you can see that going through November. But then that money that they're giving us has to be spent before December. So we're gonna have to get very intense on what we're gonna do and how we're gonna do with those funds so we can meet the obligations coming, because we're roller coastering uphill with funding, and starting January, we're headed downhill. One of the questions I got asked is that about the bond issue. If we are successful passing the bond, that is something that helps districts with cash flow. We are one of the few districts who don't have a bond right now. Fort Bragg, Ukiah, Covelo, Laytonville, they have a construction bond, and so they have cash on hand from that construction bond, which can sometimes be used to get us through a cash flow situation. So Measure I is going to be important not only because we have lots of facility needs to fix, it also can help us with our cash flow, but most importantly, we need to fix our facilities. But yeah, it is going to be a roller coaster ride next year. The couple things I want to make sure people remember: they're trying to keep the schools whole, but the rest of the economy is not being kept whole. Just as a little, oh, by the way, we did our research for food service in June. We had 100 more families out of our 1,500 qualify for free and reduced lunch. And they were direct certed because they were getting funds from the state, like unemployment and things like that. I don't see the economy getting a lot better right now. In fact, I see it snowballing the other way. I think the chances of the Democrats and Republicans come together is probably less than 50-50 on a stimulus. I think the mentality now is to hold the money in case things get worse so we can do a shelter in place. So I'm not looking to get bailed out by the feds, but if we do the right stuff, we'll be able to get through the year. And we're in as good a shape as any district around us, but we're going to have to be careful and we're going to have to be strategic to not getting cash flow problems. But,
So I do anticipate we will likely, something we haven't done so much in the past, looking at this monthly with the board. I think we will likely bring these updated projections for the cash back to you on a more regular basis.
So Nikki, this is Jeannie. I have a question. I'm not really great at this financial end of things, but since the state is balancing its budget or trying to balance its budget based on deferring payments to school districts, how do we actually know that we're going to get this money next year where it's been deferred to? Maybe by then the state budget is going to be even worse. The state economy is even going to be worse. And how do we know that we'll get that deferred money then?
So first I will say that that money now is part of law, right? So they have, unless they were to go back to the table on the budget act for this fiscal year, that money is promised to us. And I believe that the deferral schedule may even be part of that. Now, what I will say is that if they are having to absorb that expense, that $2.9 million for us, I mean, it's billions statewide, at the beginning of the next fiscal year, typically what we will see is that that pattern will continue. So in other words, the end of the next fiscal year, they'll defer that to the following year. So we just kind of end up in this cycle where year to year they're deferring until their budget reaches a point where they can start to buy themselves out of that hole.
So put a different way is they're going to pay us the $2.9 million next year, but they may turn around out of the following budget year for the state
And defer again.
Defer yet another amount of money. Could be that same amount, could be less, could be more.
And I would say so I anticipate those deferrals, yes, to continue. The other thing is that also sort of, impact us even further if they take a different strategy and decide to do budget reductions for next fiscal year to schools. So this year they chose not to, but if they were to do that for the following year, and we obviously won't know that until next June, then we could be in a situation where we're dealing with absorbing budget reductions as well as deferrals at the same time.
That is the gloomy picture. Based on what we know now, we should be able to survive and be all right. But it's not hard to figure out. In the next 2 or 3 months, if we get worse and we're shelter in place, if we go to shelter in place, you can just attach to that more deferments and we're not getting the funding they had anticipated. Because people got to be to work to make the economy go to get tax revenue. It's really just that simple. And so based on what we know now, we're going to survive it and we're going to be okay. We're not going to be great, but we're going to be okay. We'll be as good or better than any district around us financially, but it doesn't mean we're in great shape because we still have things that we've put off doing and things we're not doing this year that we'd like to do. So we're not out of the woods, but we have a path to get out.
Okay. Anything further? So do we need a motion to approve the let's see, I guess it's the revised budget.
Yeah.
Nikki, will you unshare, please?
Yes. Let me see. Stop. There we go.
Thank you.
From the rest of the board, do we have anybody interested in providing a motion to approve in a second?
I move that we approve the revised budget.
I'll second it.
Seconded by. Any further discussion? Questions by the board? Hearing none, I'll move to the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
May I have clarification who seconded that vote?
I believe it was Mr. Chavez.
Thank you.
That is correct.
Okay. We have struck items F and G from the agenda. We're moving on to items H through L. These are all first reads. And enjoy your reading, gentlemen and ladies. I wish we'd known about striking F and G earlier because I already read them.
They'll be back. Alex, for clarification, it's items H through N.
H through N. N, okay, I see N is also there. Okay. So we'll recognize the fact that we have those and then move on to item 13, public comments for items not on the agenda, unless somebody has any discussion on items H through N.
Just that they're all ed code changes, most of them. I mean, it's almost all, everything's ed code. There's nothing in there generated by us.
Right. There was nothing, I saw nothing in there that jumped out at me, I should say.
There is one item N that is not a policy change. Biannually, the board has to approve a conflict of interest on even numbered years, and it's an even year. There's no changes, but it's there as a first read.
Yep. We don't need to actually take action on that though, do we, Trina?
It's just in there, the same as your other policies. I mean, we'll approve it first read, second read, just like the others.
Got it. Okay. And then moving forward, public comments for items not on the agenda. Anybody have any public comments for items not on the agenda? Please speak up. Amy, go ahead and ask your question.
I'm wondering about the CARE Act money that the federal government has passed down to the district. What is happening with that? And is there a committee being formed to talk about it and to consult with?
Probably the best one to answer that'll be Mark.
Mark, you're on. No one can hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. At this point, we were just trying to get our budget in line. I have lots of ideas that have been given to me. I'll put a committee together to do that, but I think it's important to remember that this is one-time money that has to be done by December. So hiring people and that kind of stuff is going to be really problematic. We need to look at district things that we need to fix and need to get in place. Most of it comes from a learning loss mitigation. It's not all the same money. I believe there's 3 different funds involved in that. And it essentially is just another part of our budget this year. Our funding is flat. It's basically the same as it was a year ago, regardless of the source it came from. So, yeah, but with something we need to do.
So, and just to clarify too, that the learning loss mitigation funds came with the requirement that the district will be passing a written plan as to how those funds will be spent, and that plan must be adopted by the end of September.
By the who?
By the end of September.
Oh, thanks.
And just to clarify, before the plan is written up, it's stated by EdSource that the district is to meet with families or community, teachers, and parents. So it's it all has to be discussed before it's written up, and it's due by September 30th, but the money has to be used by December, the end of December. So I'm just curious, when is that going to take place? And I'd like to be a part of it. And so I'm wondering when that will take place.
Well, as I said, we haven't done that yet. I'm aware of the rules and who has to be part of it. It's not a great deal different than LCAP. LCAP had kind of the same caveats. And so we need to get that in place, and I have to get it to the board for an approval, and we have to do some meetings. But my first priority is getting us up and running in school and distance learning. And between now and the start of school, I'll be trying to put people together to make that committee happen and have plenty of ideas for it already.
Mark, can you send send the basically the rules for spending that money to the board?
Sure. Yeah, there are very specific rules on what it's for. And again, there are 3 different funds, aren't there, Nikki?
Yes, so they are generated by 3 different allocation methods. So one of them is based on the number of students with disabilities. One is based on how supplemental concentration grant is allocated, and one is based on how total LCFF is allocated. And there are some sort of particular aspects. It is fairly complex in that they have it in different places in the budget. They have some sort of, I guess, different rules about certain parts of it. There is this tiny part of it that can be spent until the end of the year, but that's the minority of it. The most of it has to be spent by December. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. Everything
Thank
that
you.
comes from the state comes with strings.
Any other questions for items not on the agenda?
Oh, oh no, wait, I'm sorry. It's the one to put things on the next agenda.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Hearing no other items, go ahead, Paula.
I'm curious if maybe we can put on the agenda. I don't know exactly how this goes, but excuse me, for Proposition 15, I'd like our school district to, stand by it, and before we've done resolutions or something, and I just like to make sure that that's on there, or at least an open discussion, or somehow we need to get the communities and schools deal passed. That'll help us a lot with money.
Okay.
Paula, can you get me the information for Proposition 15?
I have a little, I sort of think the union, the WTA has a lot more. I know I'm hoping to get some posters from them. Do you want to maybe connect?
I see there's a comment here from Dawn suggesting that it could be part of that.
Okay. I mean, it's, from what I've read all about it and from some corrections and things that have been made, it would be good if we could bring out the correct information kind of to the whole public. There was just a little lawsuit, or not really, I mean, it got settled, but that there was misinformation about Prop 15 and who was going to pay the bill, etc. And that just got settled, but it hasn't been publicized. And I really do think that, we need to make it really clear who would be paying that tax and where the money would go and things like that. Willits stands to gain over $1 million, I understand.
I can make that a discussion item.
Okay, thank you. And yes, maybe Dawn, if I could impose on you or Tessa or somebody to give that presentation or do whatever you can.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other items for the next board meeting? And not everybody jump in at once, but failing that, if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn.
One last thing. Would you be able to put that on the agenda to discuss the CARE Act money? Because I just want to stress that that money, it's supposed to be talked about and discussed with community, teachers, and parents before the plan is in place, before it's written up. Those are strict rules on the paperwork. So I would love to put on the next agenda to talk about it, or I will just come back in September and ask in the beginning and see how it's going.
I'm certain that the superintendent and the staff will follow all the rules that are necessary for us to properly utilize those funds. And I hope that we do get the appropriate input from all the parties that are concerned. At the board level, I'm not concerned necessarily with being overly nitpicking with respect to how the superintendent's going to go about that. My expectation, I'm sure the board's expectation, is that the superintendent will follow all the rules and get the appropriate input from all the parties that need to be in place.
based on the timeframes we do board meetings, we may need to do a special one near the end of the month, depending
I
on.
think that's, yeah, because we have to bring it to actually 2 meetings from what I understand, which in the same way that we do with LCAP.
Right. So
Can we-
I'm
can we pick
anticipating
that meeting date?
we do one at our, I don't know what the date is, the 12th or whatever it is of September.
September.
And then we'll go back, we'll have to come back at the end of the month. And it should be just a single item issue unless we have something else on the burner.
And so it sounds like there'll be plenty of oversight for this thing regardless.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything further? Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
And a second?
I second.
Very good. And all in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you,
Aye.
everyone.
Thank
Have a great night.
you.
Mhm.
Hey, Bob Kolvik, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
In regards to the PG&E easement, I'm going to need to get your signature on that form, and we'll also have to get it notarized. So I'll be in touch tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll probably be home late in the afternoon.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good.